Have you ever felt that knot in your stomach on the first day at a new job? It's like you're walking into a room full of strangers, not knowing what to expect or how you'll fit in. The nerves are overwhelming, your heart races, and the question that keeps running through your mind is, will I make a good impression? It's a moment we've all been through. No matter how confident we are, that first day can feel like the hardest. But what if I told you that those nerves can be a sign of growth? That the awkward silences, the uncertain steps, and even the fear of messing up are all part of the journey to success? Hi, I'm Emma, and today I want to share my story about the first day at a new job. The day I thought would be filled with uncertainty turned out to be full of unexpected lessons. This story isn't just about the nerves we all feel when stepping into the unknown. It's about overcoming them, meeting new colleagues, and finding your place in the chaos of a new workplace. By the end of this story, you'll realize that those first-day jitters are a normal part of starting something new, and it's how we respond to them that truly matters. So, let me take you on a journey through my first day, where I learned not only about my new job but also about myself. Stick with me, and I'll show you how I turned my nervousness into confidence. You won't want to miss what happened next. I woke up to the sound of my alarm ringing much earlier than usual. The excitement was already building, but so was the anxiety. I had barely slept the night before, tossing and turning, thinking about everything that could go wrong on my first day at the new job. Would I fit in? Would my boss like me? Could I handle the responsibilities? The questions kept circling in my mind like an endless loop. As I quickly got dressed in my best outfit, one I'd spent hours choosing the day before, I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. My reflection in the mirror looked just as nervous as I felt, but I forced myself to smile. "You've got this," I whispered to myself, trying to push the doubt away. The drive to work was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my thoughts racing faster than the car on the road. What was I going to do if I made a fool of myself? What if I said something wrong? I had so many questions but no answers. When I finally arrived, I parked the car and sat in silence for a moment, staring at the office building in front of me. It looked so big, so important, and here I was, just a new face among many. I took a deep breath, grabbed my bag, and stepped out of the car. Each step felt heavy, like I was walking into the unknown. As I entered the building, I was greeted by the receptionist with a warm smile. "Welcome. Are you here for your first day?" she asked cheerfully. Her bright attitude helped ease my nerves a little, but I could still feel the lump in my throat. I followed her directions to the office floor, feeling like everyone was watching me, judging me with their eyes. The hallway seemed longer than it was, and the noise of the office environment felt deafening. People were talking, typing, walking, and everything seemed so fast-paced. It felt like everyone had already found their place, while I was still trying to figure out where to go. I finally reached my desk, and for a second, I just stood there, staring at the empty chair and the computer screen in front of me. It felt a little lonely, but I quickly shook off the feeling. This is just the beginning, I thought. I'll figure it out. Just then, a colleague walked by and smiled at me. She introduced herself as Sarah and asked if I needed help with anything. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask," she said, her voice friendly and warm. For the first time that morning, I felt like maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. After Sarah left, I sat down at my desk, feeling a little more at ease. The room was filled with people talking on the phone, typing away at their computers, and having small conversations with each other. It was clear that everyone had their own rhythm, their own routine, and here I was, the new person trying to figure out how I fit into all of this. I opened my computer, logged into the system, and began sorting through the emails, trying to look busy and professional. But as the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. I glanced around the office, watching colleagues interact with each other as if they had known each other for years. Everyone seemed so comfortable in their roles, and I was still trying to figure out where the coffee machine was. The silence at my desk was both comforting and suffocating at the same time. I knew I needed to introduce myself to more people, but I wasn't sure how. Should I just walk up to someone and say, "Hi, I'm new here"? What if they didn't respond well? What if they thought I was bothering them? My thoughts swirled in my head like a storm. Then, out of nowhere, a voice broke through my thoughts. "Hey, I'm Jason. You're new here, right?" I turned to see a guy standing at the edge of my desk, holding a cup of coffee in one hand. He had a friendly smile, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Yeah. "I'm Emma," I stammered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Nice to meet you." Jason nodded and pulled up a chair to sit beside me. "How's your first day going?" he asked, taking a sip of his coffee. I could feel my face flush with nervousness. It's going okay. A little overwhelming, though. There's so much to take in." He chuckled, a warm and genuine sound. "Yeah, that's pretty normal. The first few days are always a bit much. But don't worry, you'll get the hang of it." I felt relieved that Jason didn't seem judgmental or rushed. His tone was laid back, and for the first time since arriving, I felt like I wasn't just an outsider. We talked for a few minutes, and I began to feel a little more comfortable. But just as I started to think things might be going well, Jason stood up and glanced at his watch. "Well, I have to run to a meeting now, but if you need anything, just ask. Everyone here is really nice." As he walked away, I couldn't help but feel like that was the first of many awkward moments I'd have that day. The conversation had been nice, but I was still unsure about how to move forward. Should I continue to talk to more people, or should I just stay at my desk and wait for someone to come to me? After Jason walked off, I sat back in my chair, trying to focus on the task at hand. But the noise of the office continued to fill my ears, making it hard to concentrate. I had a few assignments to go through, but the more I stared at the screen, the more the weight of being the new person started to settle in. It wasn't that I wasn't capable, it was just the overwhelming feeling of being the newbie in a room full of people who already seemed to know the ropes. I glanced around the office, hoping for another sign that I wasn't completely out of place. To my left, a group of people were chatting and laughing about a recent work trip, and on my right, a colleague was on a call, speaking confidently and quickly. Everyone seemed so established, so sure of themselves. It felt like I was the only one who didn't quite fit in yet. I decided to focus on my work, hoping it would help take my mind off the discomfort. I dug through the folders and opened the email that had been sitting in my inbox for the last few minutes. The task seemed simple enough, a few data reports to organize. As I started working, I found myself losing track of time. The clicking of my keyboard, the soft hum of conversations around me, and the occasional sound of a printer working in the background became a comforting white noise. It felt like I was starting to settle in, even if just a little. But then something happened. I had been so focused on my task that I hadn't noticed someone standing beside my desk. It was Sarah again. "Hey, how's it going?" she asked, her voice friendly but full of curiosity. I looked up, startled for a moment. "Oh, hey. It's going okay, just trying to get the hang of things." She smiled, leaning against my desk. "That's good to hear. I know it can feel a little overwhelming at first, but you'll find your rhythm soon enough." She seemed so calm and confident, a complete contrast to how I felt. I envied that sense of ease. As we talked, she shared a little bit about her own first days at the company, making me feel less alone in the experience. She explained how she, too, had felt the pressure to fit in and do well, but over time, things had become second nature. It was comforting to hear that even the most seasoned employees had gone through the same struggles. "Don't worry," Sarah continued with a wink. "You're doing great. Just take it one step at a time." I smiled back, appreciating her encouragement. But as she left, I realized I still had a lot to figure out. My desk was now covered in papers and notes, but there was something more to this first day than just the work. I hadn't yet figured out how to connect with everyone else, how to truly feel like I belonged. But then, just as I was about to get back to work, another colleague walked by and waved, giving me a nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me think. Maybe I was slowly starting to find my place after all. The morning passed by quicker than I had expected. I managed to finish a couple of tasks, though I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still trying to prove myself. My colleagues had all seemed friendly, but I didn't feel like I truly knew anyone yet. I kept wondering when the real connections would happen. As the clock hit noon, the office began to quiet down. People started standing up from their desks, stretching, and chatting about lunch plans. I glanced around, unsure of what to do next. Should I just sit at my desk and eat, or should I join them? The thought of sitting alone in the break room didn't seem like the best option, but neither did intruding on a group that already seemed comfortable with each other. Just then, Sarah appeared at my desk. She must have noticed me hesitating, because she gave me a reassuring smile. "Hey, Emma, you want to grab lunch with me? A few of us are heading out to that cafe down the street. You're welcome to join." The invitation caught me by surprise, but it was exactly what I needed. It felt like a lifeline, an opportunity to break free from my anxiety and make a real connection. I smiled, relieved, and agreed. I'd love to. "Thanks for asking." As we walked together toward the exit, Sarah introduced me to a few of her colleagues. There was Mark, a guy who had been with the company for years and seemed to know everyone in the office, and Julia, who had a quirky sense of humor that made me laugh right away. The group was easygoing, chatting casually as we walked to the cafe. I still felt a little out of place, but I reminded myself that this was just another step toward finding my rhythm. The cafe was small but cozy, with a few tables filled with people enjoying their lunch. We found a spot by the window and sat down. As the conversation flowed, I found myself relaxing more and more. The topics varied from weekend plans to funny work-related stories. There was even a bit of teasing about a recent office prank, which made everyone laugh. It was nice to hear everyone joke around, and for the first time, I felt like I was part of something. But then, just as I was starting to feel comfortable, I made the mistake of trying to join in on a joke. I didn't fully understand the context, so I ended up sounding awkward. The table fell quiet for a second, and I could feel my cheeks turning red. I quickly tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. I could tell that I had made things a bit uncomfortable. For a moment, I felt like I had ruined the entire lunch. I could feel the weight of my mistake, and I started to regret speaking at all. But just as I was about to retreat into silence, Mark spoke up. "It's okay, Emma," he said, giving me an easy smile. "We've all been there. No big deal." Julia, noticing my discomfort, added, "Yeah, don't worry about it. We're just messing around. Everyone's still getting to know each other."
Mr. Harrison crouched down next to him, meeting his gaze. "Ethan, this is about you, not them. It's about showing yourself what you're capable of, not worrying about what others think. You've got something no one else has, the ability to create something unique. Don't let fear stop you now." There was a long pause. Ethan looked down at his design, biting his lip. Mr. Harrison could tell he was still fighting his own doubts. But then, slowly, Ethan nodded. "Okay. I'll enter," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Mr. Harrison smiled. "That's the spirit. I'm proud of you." The days leading up to the competition were a whirlwind of nervous energy. Ethan spent his evenings working on his design, and Mr. Harrison would check in with him after school, offering advice or just sitting quietly while Ethan worked through his thoughts. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when Ethan grew frustrated and nearly gave up. But each time, Mr. Harrison was there to remind him of how far he had come. On the day of the competition, Mr. Harrison found himself pacing outside the art room, waiting for the judges to arrive. Ethan had agreed to come, though he wasn't keen on speaking to anyone. His sketch was finished, and Mr. Harrison could see the pride in Ethan's eyes. But there was still an air of doubt hanging over him. When Ethan walked in, he seemed quieter than usual, his hands stuffed into his pockets. He hesitated at the door before stepping inside, looking around at the other students who were busy setting up their pieces. Some of them were whispering to each other, clearly discussing the competition, while others were just focused on their work. Ethan walked past them, glancing nervously at their projects. Mr. Harrison gave him a small nod of encouragement from across the room. Ethan returned it with a reluctant smile, but there was still tension in his posture. "Are you ready?" Mr. Harrison asked when he approached him. Ethan shrugged, but there was a flicker of something new in his eyes, determination. "I guess so," he said, his voice steady. The judges soon arrived, and one by one, they began to look at the students' work. Mr. Harrison stood off to the side, watching Ethan's reaction. His hands were shaking slightly, but he was holding himself together. Then, it was Ethan's turn. The judges came up to his piece, and the room fell silent. For a moment, Ethan's face tightened with nerves. But as the judges started asking him questions about his design, he began to relax. Slowly but surely, he spoke with more confidence about his work, explaining the details and the ideas behind it. Mr. Harrison couldn't help but feel proud of him. Ethan was holding his own. When the judges left, Mr. Harrison walked over to him. "How do you feel?" he asked, genuinely curious. Ethan shrugged again, though his smile was more genuine now. "Not bad. I think they liked it." "I'm sure they did," Mr. Harrison said, smiling warmly. "You did great, Ethan." Ethan nodded, but there was something else in his eyes now, something he hadn't had before. Hope. As they left the competition, the atmosphere between them had changed. Ethan no longer seemed like the angry, defiant student who had walked into Mr. Harrison's class weeks ago. He wasn't perfect, and there were still doubts and fears, but something in him had shifted. There was a newfound confidence in his step, a small but significant victory. He had unlocked something inside himself, and for the first time in a long time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. But as they walked back to class, Mr. Harrison noticed something in Ethan's expression, a mix of anticipation and worry. The competition had opened a door, but what if Ethan still wasn't sure if he belonged on the other side? The following days after the competition were a whirlwind of emotions for Ethan. He had done something he never thought possible. He entered the art competition and spoke about his work with confidence. But even as the initial thrill of participation began to fade, a new feeling lingered. It was a fear that Ethan couldn't shake. What if he wasn't good enough? What if this was all just a fluke, and he didn't really have what it took to succeed? Mr. Harrison noticed the change in him. Ethan had become withdrawn again, quieter than usual. He didn't bring his sketchbook to class anymore, and his focus seemed to drift. Even though the competition had been a success in many ways, it hadn't erased the deep-rooted self-doubt that still haunted Ethan. One afternoon, as Mr. Harrison was handing back graded papers, he spotted Ethan staring out the window, his fingers tapping nervously on his desk. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, but Ethan didn't move. He remained seated, as if lost in thought. Mr. Harrison approached him carefully. "Ethan," he said softly, "what's going on? You seem a little off today." Ethan looked up, his expression guarded. He opened his mouth to say something but quickly closed it. The words weren't coming out the way he wanted. "I just don't know anymore," Ethan finally said after a long silence. "What if I'm not really cut out for this? What if they were just being nice at the competition? What if I'm just not good enough?" Mr. Harrison sat down beside him, taking a deep breath. He knew this moment was coming. After all, it was never easy to face your own fears head-on. "Ethan," Mr. Harrison said gently, "I've seen you grow so much. I've watched you go from that angry, frustrated kid to someone who has the courage to share their work with the world. Do you really think that happened by accident? You've got a gift, and no competition or comment from anyone can take that away." Ethan shook his head, looking down at his desk. "But what if it's not enough? What if I try again, and I still fail?" Mr. Harrison placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice firm but kind. "You're not failing, Ethan. Even when things don't turn out the way you want, you're still moving forward. You've already come so far. The fact that you're willing to face your fears, to try again, that's the real victory." Ethan stared at the desk, his jaw clenched as he processed Mr. Harrison's words. His fears seemed so heavy, so real. But somehow, in the quiet support of Mr. Harrison's presence, those fears didn't seem quite as insurmountable.
Their kindness helped me breathe again. It was a small mistake, but it had been enough to make me question if I belonged. I had worried about fitting in, and in that moment, I realized that fitting in didn't require perfection. It was okay to make mistakes. It was okay to not know everything on the first day. As we finished lunch, the conversation shifted to something else, and I felt the tension begin to lift. I still wasn't sure how everything would play out, but at least now I knew I wasn't the only one feeling like a fish out of water. After lunch, I returned to the office with a slight sense of relief. The awkwardness of the morning had been replaced by small but significant steps toward feeling more comfortable. I had survived the lunch break, and even though I had stumbled once or twice, the support from my new colleagues made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this whole new job thing. But as soon as I sat down at my desk, the reality of the afternoon hit me. The tasks were piling up, and the work environment had shifted again. The noise in the office felt louder, and everyone seemed so focused on their responsibilities. I glanced at the clock. It was only 2 p.m., but it felt like the day had stretched on forever. The excitement of meeting new people and learning new things was fading, and the nervousness of not being good enough started creeping back in. I stared at the pile of reports in front of me, trying to make sense of them. My head felt foggy, like I couldn't focus. I had been trying to follow the instructions given to me in the morning, but every time I made progress, I second-guessed myself. Was I doing it right? Were my numbers accurate? What if I missed something important? The doubt was overwhelming, and I couldn't shake it. Just then my manager Linda walked by. She gave me a friendly smile and asked, "How's everything going, Emma? Do you need any help with the reports?" For a second, I froze. The thought of asking for help felt like admitting defeat. I didn't want to seem incompetent on my first day. I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was doing. But at the same time, I realized that asking for help was a normal part of any new job. No one expected me to have all the answers right away. I took a deep breath and said, "Actually, I could use a little guidance. I'm just not sure if I'm on the right track with these reports." Linda smiled warmly and pulled up a chair. "No worries, Emma. Let's go through them together. You're doing fine, just need a little clarity, and that's totally okay." As she helped me with the reports, explaining a few things I had missed and guiding me through the process. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't that I had gotten everything wrong. It was that I had asked for help and learned something new. It reminded me that no one expected perfection from day one. It was about progress, not perfection. When Linda left to attend a meeting, I felt a newfound sense of confidence. I had made it through the afternoon without spiraling into panic, and that was an accomplishment in itself. But just as I was starting to feel proud of myself, I overheard a conversation at the nearby desk. Did you hear about the big project coming up next week? It's a huge opportunity for anyone who's interested. The mention of a big project made my stomach churn. What if I wasn't ready for something like that? What if I wasn't good enough to be included in something so important? The thought brought me back to the same fears that had been nagging me all day. Would I ever feel ready? I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts away. One step at a time, I reminded myself. The first day wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, trying my best, and learning from every experience. As the day wore on, I found myself feeling more and more mentally drained. I had been working through reports, checking and rechecking my work, trying to get everything just right. The nerves from the morning seemed to have faded a little, but they were quickly replaced by the pressure of proving myself. The clock seemed to slow down, every tick feeling like a reminder that I still had so much to learn, so many questions, and so much uncertainty. But then, as the day was winding down, something unexpected happened. A colleague, Mark, whom I had briefly met during lunch, came over to my desk. He gave me a friendly wave and said, "Hey, Emma, how's the first day going?" "Surviving." I smiled, appreciating the fact that he remembered me. "Yeah, it's going. A bit overwhelming, but I'm managing." Mark nodded and then, with a playful grin, added, "Well, if you're ever looking for a little break from all the work, there's an office tradition at the end of the day. Everyone gathers for a quick game of trivia before we head out. It's a nice way to unwind, and you get to know everyone better." A game of trivia? It sounded like a great opportunity to relax and bond with the team, but I hesitated. What if I made a fool of myself? What if I didn't know the answers? But then I remembered how Jason had said earlier that everyone here was nice. Maybe this was just another way to settle in, to get to know the people I'd be working with. I looked at Mark and smiled. That sounds fun. I'm in. As the workday came to an end, everyone gathered in the break room for the trivia game. The atmosphere was light and relaxed, filled with laughter and friendly competition. I took a seat at one of the tables, trying not to feel too nervous. The questions ranged from general knowledge to pop culture, and it was clear that everyone was enjoying themselves. At first, I didn't speak much, just observing how the others interacted, but soon enough, I found myself getting caught up in the fun. The game was a mix of easy and difficult questions, and I was surprised to find that I actually knew a few of the answers. My heart started to race a little less with every correct answer, and by the time it was my turn to answer a question, I felt a strange sense of confidence. The question was simple: what's the capital of France? I raised my hand, confident in my answer. Paris. Correct. Mark announced, and the room erupted in cheers. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. I had contributed to the group, and that small moment of success gave me a much-needed boost of confidence. As the trivia game wrapped up and everyone began to gather their things to leave, I realized something important. This first day hadn't been perfect. I had made mistakes, felt out of place, and struggled to find my confidence. But I had also learned a lot. I had met new people, stepped outside my comfort zone, and even found moments where I could contribute and feel valued. As I walked out of the office, I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't expected to feel so soon. The day wasn't over, and the journey of settling into this new job was far from complete. But for the first time, I felt a little more at home. I wasn't just the new person anymore. I was someone who was starting to find her place. And who knew? Maybe tomorrow would bring even more surprises. And just like that, a nerve-wracking first day transformed into a day full of small wins and new connections. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, being willing to learn, and taking one step at a time. And maybe that's the key to every new challenge in life, embracing the uncertainty, the awkwardness, and the nerves. Because in the end, that's what makes us grow.